I never thought I'd be the kind of woman going through my dead husband's belongings with a magnifying glass. But there I was at 72, sitting on our bedroom floor with a mysterious wooden box in my lap that would turn everything I thought I knew about my 47-year marriage completely upside down. The contents inside weren't just papers and photographs. They were proof that the man I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with had been living a double life that was so elaborate, so carefully constructed, that I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. My name is Mary Patterson, and for nearly 5 decades I thought I had the most ordinary, predictable marriage in the world. Robert was a quiet man, methodical in his ways, who worked as an insurance adjuster for 38 years before retiring. He never raised his voice, never made grand gestures, never surprised me with anything more exciting than picking up my favorite cookies from the bakery on his way home from work. We had 2 children, Sarah, now 45 and living in Portland with her investment banker husband, and Michael, 42, who runs a small accounting firm here in town. Our life was routine, comfortable, and if I'm being honest, sometimes a little boring. Robert passed away 6 months ago from a sudden heart attack. One minute he was trimming the hedge in our front yard on a Tuesday morning, and the next minute our neighbor Mrs. Chun was calling 911 because she saw him collapse. The doctors said it was massive and instantaneous. He probably didn't even know what was happening. At his funeral, everyone talked about what a steady, dependable man he'd been. Salt of the earth, people kept saying. Never caused a moment of trouble for anyone. I nodded and smiled and accepted casseroles and condolences, all while feeling like I was sleepwalking through someone else's life. The first few months after Robert died were exactly what you'd expect. I went through the motions of grief counseling, slowly started giving away his clothes, and tried to figure out how to exist as just Mary instead of half of Mary and Robert. Sarah called every few days from Oregon to check on me, always with that carefully concerned tone that made it clear she thought I was one bad day away from completely falling apart. Michael stopped by twice a week, usually to mow the lawn or fix something that was creaking or dripping, but also to give me those worried looks that adult children give their aging parents. "Mom, you know you don't have to rush into anything," Sarah had said during one of our phone calls. "Dad's closet can wait. His office can wait. Just take your time." But the truth was, I wasn't taking my time because I was grieving. I was taking my time because I was dreading it. Robert had been a pack rat, someone who kept every receipt, every warranty, every piece of paper that had ever passed through our house. His office was stacked with file cabinets and cardboard boxes, and his side of the walk-in closet looked like a small library had exploded. The thought of sorting through 47 years of accumulated stuff was overwhelming. It was Michael who finally pushed me to start. "Mom, I know it's hard, but we really need to go through Dad's things," he'd said during one of his visits. "There might be important papers we need for the estate, insurance documents, things like that. I can help you if you want." I told him I'd handle it myself. Some part of me felt like going through Robert's belongings was something I needed to do alone, like a final act of wifehood. So on a rainy Thursday in October, exactly 6 months after Robert's funeral, I made myself a cup of coffee, put on his old university sweatshirt that still smelled faintly like his cologne, and walked into our bedroom closet with a roll of garbage bags and a box of tissues. I started with the easy things. The suits he never wore anymore, the collection of ties from various holidays and Father's Days, the stack of t-shirts that had seen better days. Everything went into neat piles. Donate, trash, or keep for sentimental reasons. It was tedious work, but not particularly emotional. These were just clothes after all. Fabric and buttons that had once covered the man I loved, but not the man himself. It was when I was clearing out the top shelf, the one Robert had claimed for his important papers, that I found it. Behind a stack of old tax returns and a shoebox full of warranty information for appliances we hadn't owned in 20 years, my fingers touched something unexpected. A wooden box, about the size of a shoebox but heavier, with a small brass latch that had tarnished with age. I'd never seen this box before. In 47 years of marriage, living in the same house for 32 of those years, sharing the same closet, I had never once noticed this wooden box. It wasn't hidden exactly, but it wasn't prominent either. It had been tucked away in the back corner, behind things that Robert knew I'd never have any reason to move. The box was beautiful, actually. Made of dark cherry wood with brass corners and that tarnished latch. It looked old, maybe even antique, and definitely expensive. The kind of thing you'd find in an estate sale or a high-end antique shop. Robert had never been interested in antiques, had never shown any appreciation for anything that couldn't be filed in alphabetical order or stored in a labeled manila folder. I carried the box to our bed and sat down with it in my lap, running my fingers over the smooth wood. There was no lock, just the brass latch, but something about the weight of it, the deliberate way it had been hidden, made me hesitate. In 47 years of marriage, Robert and I had never kept secrets from each other. We'd shared everything: bank accounts, dreams, fears, daily mundane details about our jobs and our children and our neighbors. What could possibly be in this box that I didn't already know about? I lifted the latch. The first thing I saw was a photograph. It was an old Polaroid, the kind with the white border that had turned slightly yellow with age. The photo showed Robert, but not the Robert the first knew. This Robert was young, maybe in his early 20s, with longer hair and a mustache I'd never seen before. He was standing next to a woman I didn't recognize, a beautiful woman with dark hair and a bright smile, and they were both holding a baby. I stared at this photograph for a full minute before I could even process what I was seeing. Robert had no mustache when I met him in 1975. Robert's hair had never been that long, not even in the 70s. And Robert had never mentioned having a child with anyone else before me. But there was more. Under the photograph was a stack of letters, maybe 30 or 40 of them, tied together with a blue ribbon that had faded to almost gray. The return address on the top envelope made my stomach drop. Elena Rodriguez, 247, Maple Street, Sacramento, California. The postmark was from 1974, a year before Robert and I met. My hands were shaking as I untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. It was written in careful, feminine handwriting on pale blue stationery. "My dearest Robert," it began. "Little Carmen asked about you again today. She's starting to put words together, and yesterday she pointed at your photograph and said, 'Papa.' I told her that Papa loves her very much and will come visit again soon. I know how difficult this situation is for both of us, but please don't let too much time pass before your next visit. She needs her father and I need you too. All my love, Elena." I read that letter 3 times before I could make myself believe what I was seeing. Then I opened another one. "Robert, I got your letter about the new job opportunity. I understand why you feel you need to take it, but Sacramento to Denver feels so far away. Carmen is walking now, and every day she does something new that I want to share with you. Can't you find something closer? Can't we make this work somehow? I love you, Elena." And another. "I can't believe you're getting married. After everything we've meant to each other, after Carmen, after all the promises you made about finding a way for us to be together properly, you're choosing someone else. I won't stop you from having the life you think you want, but don't expect me to pretend this doesn't break my heart. Carmen deserves better than a father who visits twice a year and sends birthday cards signed Uncle Robert. Elena." I went through letter after letter, watching the story of my husband's secret life unfold in careful blue handwriting. Elena Rodriguez had been Robert's girlfriend. No more than that, she'd been the love of his life. Before he met me. They'd had a daughter together, Carmen, who was born in 1973. Robert had moved from California to Denver in 1975, ostensibly for a job opportunity, but really because he was starting over. Starting fresh. Leaving behind a woman who loved him and a daughter who called him Papa. But he hadn't really left them behind. The letters showed that he'd continued to visit, to send money, to maintain a relationship with both Elena and Carmen even after he married me. The correspondence went on for years. Through our engagement, our wedding, the births of our children Sarah and Michael. There were gaps, sometimes months or even years, where the letters stopped, but they always started again. The last letter in the stack was dated just 5 years ago. 5 years ago, when Robert was 67 and I was 67 and we were supposed to be enjoying our golden years together. "Robert, Carmen's wedding is next month, and she still hopes you'll be able to come. I know you can't tell Mary about us. I've accepted that long ago. But our daughter is getting married. She's 36 years old, and she's marrying a wonderful man who makes her laugh every day. Don't you want to walk her down the aisle? Don't you want to be her father publicly for just this one day? I'm not asking you to leave Mary. I'm not asking you to disrupt the life you've built. I'm asking you to be present for the most important day of our daughter's life. Think about it. Love always, Elena." I set the letters aside and looked deeper into the box. There were photographs, dozens of them. Pictures of Robert visiting California over the years. Robert holding a toddler who had his eyes and his stubborn chin. Robert teaching a young girl to ride a bicycle. Robert at what looked like high school and college graduations. Robert dancing with a beautiful woman at what was clearly a wedding, but not our wedding. There were receipts for plane tickets to Sacramento going back decades. Hotel receipts. Restaurant receipts. A whole paper trail of a life I knew nothing about. At the bottom of the box was a birth certificate. Carmen Elena Rodriguez, born June 15, 1973. Father, Robert James Patterson. Mother, Elena Maria Rodriguez. Carmen Elena Rodriguez was Robert's daughter. Robert's first daughter. The daughter he'd had 2 years before he met me, 3 years before Sarah was born. The daughter whose existence he'd hidden from me for 47 years of marriage. I sat on our bed surrounded by the evidence of my husband's secret life, and tried to make sense of what I was feeling. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It wasn't heartbreak, not in the traditional sense. It was something much more complicated. A complete reshuffling of everything I thought I knew about the man I'd shared my life with. Robert wasn't the simple, straightforward man everyone believed him to be. He wasn't the man who never surprised me, who never made grand gestures, who never had any drama in his life. Robert was someone who had maintained a decades-long relationship with another woman and another family while being married to me. Robert was someone who had walked away from his first daughter to start fresh with me, but who had never really let go of either life. I thought about all the business trips Robert had taken over the years, all the weekend conferences and training seminars, all the times he'd said he needed to drive somewhere for work and would be back late. I'd never questioned any of it because Robert was the most trustworthy person I knew. He paid the bills on time, he never forgot anniversaries or birthdays, he never gave me any reason to doubt him. But now I was wondering, how many of those business trips had actually been visits to see Elena and Carmen? How many times had he told me he was in a hotel in Kansas City or Phoenix when he was really in Sacramento, playing father to a daughter I didn't know existed? I picked up one of the more recent photographs. It showed Robert at what looked like a backyard barbecue, his arm around Elena, who was still beautiful in her 60s, with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, while a younger woman who was clearly Carmen stood nearby with a man I assumed was her husband and 2 small children. Robert was a grandfather. He had grandchildren I'd never met, a daughter-in-law he'd never mentioned, a whole extended family that existed completely outside the life we'd built together. The strangest part was how happy he looked in these pictures. Not just content the way he usually looked in our family photos, but genuinely happy, relaxed, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. I found myself wondering about Elena. What kind of woman maintains a relationship with a married man for decades? What kind of woman lets her daughter call someone Papa, when he can only visit twice a year? But as I read more of her letters, I started to understand. Elena loved Robert. Really truly loved him in a way that was patient and enduring and completely without conditions. She never demanded that he leave me. She never threatened to expose the secret. She just accepted the pieces of himself that he was willing to give and made the best life she could with them. I know this isn't the life either of us planned, one of her letters said. But I'd rather have part of you than all of someone else. Carmen deserves to know her father, even if it has to be this way. I just hope someday you'll find a way to make peace with the choices you've made. And Robert, my Robert, the man who had never in 47 years raised his voice or shown any sign of internal conflict, had been living with this enormous secret, this double life, this constant tension between the family he'd chosen and the family he'd created by accident. I started doing math in my head. Carmen was born in June of 1973, which meant Elena got pregnant in late 1972 or early 1973. Sarah was born in May of 1976, which meant I got pregnant in late 1975. There was only a 3-year difference between Robert's 2 daughters. Carmen and Sarah were practically the same generation, and they had no idea the other existed. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. Had Robert been in love with Elena when he met me? Had I been some kind of rebound relationship that accidentally turned into a marriage? Or had he genuinely fallen in love with me but felt trapped by his responsibility to Elena and Carmen? And what about Elena? The letters suggested that she'd hoped for years that Robert would find a way to leave me and be with her properly. But she'd also seemed to accept, eventually, that it wasn't going to happen. The tone of her letters changed over the years, from hopeful and pleading to resigned and practical. "I'm not writing to ask you to choose anymore," one of the later letters said. "Carmen is grown now, and she understands that her father has another family that comes first. I just want you to know that we're both doing well, and we both love you. And the door is always open if you ever change your mind about what kind of life you want to live. The door is always open." Even after decades of being the other woman, of raising a daughter mostly alone, of accepting holiday visits and birthday cards signed Uncle Robert, Elena was still telling my husband that she was available, that she was still waiting. I wondered if she was still waiting now. Did Elena know that Robert had died? Had anyone told her about the funeral? Had she been somewhere in Sacramento 6 months ago, wondering why she hadn't heard from him lately? I picked up my phone and before I could talk myself out of it, Googled Elena Rodriguez, Sacramento, California. There were several results, but one of them was a Facebook profile with a photograph that looked like the woman in Robert's pictures, just older. Elena Rodriguez worked at Sacramento Community College in the admissions office. Born in 1951, which would make her my age. Her profile was mostly private, but I could see a few recent posts. Pictures of grandchildren. The same grandchildren who were in the photographs with Robert. A post about her daughter Carmen's promotion at work. A post about missing someone special on Valentine's Day. Elena Rodriguez was still alive, still in Sacramento, still part of the world my husband had been visiting for decades. And she had no idea that the man she'd been waiting for, the father of her child, the love of her life, was never coming back. I closed my laptop and sat in the silence of our bedroom, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with this information. Did I have an obligation to tell Elena that Robert had died? Did I have a right to contact her at all? Or would that be an intrusion into a relationship that had never been meant to include me? And what about my children? Sarah and Michael had grown up believing they were Robert's only children. They had a half-sister they'd never met, nieces and nephews they didn't know existed. Did they have a right to know about Carmen? Did Carmen have a right to know about them? I thought about Robert's funeral, how we'd all talked about what a simple, uncomplicated man he'd been. His co-workers had given speeches about his reliability, his attention to detail, his complete lack of drama. His fishing buddies had talked about his quiet sense of humor and his absolute trustworthiness. Michael had given a eulogy about having the most dependable father in the world, someone who never missed a school play or a baseball game, who taught him how to change a tire and balance a checkbook and treat people with respect. None of us had known that Robert was also attending Carmen's school plays and graduation ceremonies. None of us had known that he was teaching another set of grandchildren how to fish, that he was walking another daughter down the aisle, that he was living an entire parallel life that was just as full and meaningful as the one he shared with us. I felt like I was mourning two different men: the husband I thought I knew, who had died 6 months ago, and the stranger I was discovering now, who had been living a double life for decades and taking his secrets to the grave. The worst part was that I couldn't even be angry with him. How do you get angry at someone who's dead? How do you have a confrontation with someone who's not there to defend himself or explain his choices? All I could do was sit with these revelations and try to figure out how to move forward. But there was something else in the box, something I hadn't noticed at first because it was tucked under everything else. A sealed envelope with my name written on it in Robert's careful handwriting. For Mary, to be opened only after my death. My hands were trembling again as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written on Robert's personal stationery, the kind he used for important correspondence. "My dearest Mary," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it also means you found the box I hoped you'd never have to find. I know this discovery must be devastating, and I know you must have questions that I can no longer answer in person. But I need you to know that everything I'm about to tell you is the truth, and I need you to know that my love for you was never a lie." I had to stop reading for a moment to collect myself. Even from beyond the grave, Robert was surprising me. I met Elena in 1972, when I was 24 and working my first real job in Sacramento. We fell in love immediately. The kind of intense, consuming love that you read about in novels but never think will happen to you. When she got pregnant with Carmen, we made plans to get married. I was going to be a husband and father, and I thought I had my whole life figured out. But then Elena had complications during the pregnancy, and the doctors discovered that she had a heart condition that would make future pregnancies extremely dangerous. We were told that Carmen would likely be her only child, and Elena became depressed and distant. She said she couldn't marry me knowing that she couldn't give me the large family I wanted. She broke off our engagement when Carmen was 6 months old and told me to find someone else, someone who could give me everything I deserved. I tried to respect her decision, but I couldn't abandon Carmen. She was my daughter, and Elena was still the woman I loved, even if she wouldn't let me take care of them properly. So I stayed involved as much as I could, helping financially and visiting when Elena would allow it. But she was right about one thing. I did want a large family, and I did want a traditional marriage. So when the job opportunity came up in Denver, I took it, thinking I could start over. Then I met you, Mary, and everything changed again. You were so different from Elena. Practical where she was emotional, steady where she was unpredictable, confident where she was fragile. You made me feel calm in a way I'd never felt before. You made me believe that I could have a simple, peaceful life without all the drama and intensity that had defined my relationship with Elena. I fell in love with you completely, but by then I had already committed to being part of Carmen's life. Elena had started letting me visit again, and Carmen called me Papa. How could I abandon a 3-year-old child who loved me? How could I tell you about this complicated situation when our own relationship was so new and fragile? I convinced myself that I could manage both relationships without hurting anyone. I would marry you and give you the stable, drama-free marriage you deserved, while still being a father to Carmen and maintaining my friendship with Elena. I thought I was being noble, taking care of everyone's needs without forcing anyone to make difficult choices. What I didn't realize was how much this decision would cost all of us. Elena spent decades hoping I would choose her and Carmen completely. You spent decades married to a man who was keeping enormous secrets. Carmen grew up with a part-time father who couldn't acknowledge her publicly. And I spent 47 years living 2 separate lives, never able to be fully present in either one. I know this letter doesn't excuse what I did. I know that discovering my secrets after my death is perhaps the cruelest way you could have learned the truth. But I need you to understand that I never stopped loving you, Mary. You were not a consolation prize or a second choice. You were the woman who gave me Sarah and Michael, who built a beautiful home with me, who stood by me through every challenge and celebrated every success. You were my wife in every sense of the word, and I was proud to be your husband. Elena was something else entirely. She was my first love, the mother of my first child, the road not taken. Loving her didn't diminish my love for you any more than loving you diminished my love for her. I know that doesn't make sense to anyone else, but it's the truth of my heart. I'm also leaving you a choice, Mary. In this box, you'll find Elena's current address and phone number. Carmen's too. You can contact them if you want to. They would welcome the opportunity to know you and Sarah and Michael. Or you can put everything back in the box and never think about it again. Either choice is valid, and either choice has my blessing. What I hope you won't do is spend whatever time you have left feeling betrayed or deceived. Yes, I kept secrets from you, but I never lied about the important things. I never lied about loving you or being proud of our children, or being grateful for the life we built together. Those 47 years were real, Mary. Our marriage was real. My love for you was real, even if it wasn't the only love in my life. I hope someday you can forgive me for being too cowardly to tell you the truth while I was alive, and too selfish to give up either of the lives I was living. I hope you can understand that I was trying to honor commitments to people I loved, even though I went about it in completely the wrong way. Take care of yourself, my darling. Take care of Sarah and Michael. And if you decide to reach out to Elena and Carmen, take care of them too. They're good people who got caught up in my poor choices just like you did. All my love, always and forever, Robert. I read Robert's letter 3 times, and each time I felt a different emotion. The first time I was angry, furious that he'd made these monumental decisions without ever consulting me, that he'd lived a double life for decades while I was completely in the dark. The second time I was sad, heartbroken for Elena, who had waited for a man who was never going to choose her completely, and for Carmen, who had grown up with a part-time father, and for myself, who had apparently been married to a stranger. But the third time I read it, I started to understand something that I hadn't expected to understand. Robert hadn't been living a double life to deceive me, or to get away with something. He'd been living a double life because he was trying to take care of everyone he loved, even when those responsibilities were contradictory. It was misguided and ultimately selfish, but it wasn't malicious. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Robert had been honest with me about the things that mattered. He had been a good husband, attentive, faithful in his way, completely committed to our family. He had been a wonderful father to Sarah and Michael, never missing important events or failing to provide for their needs. He had been exactly the steady, reliable partner I had needed. The fact that he was also trying to be a good father to Carmen and a good friend to Elena didn't change any of that. It just made him more complicated than I had realized. But there was still the question of what to do now. Robert had given me a choice. Contact Elena and Carmen, or put everything back in the box and pretend I'd never found it. Both options felt impossible. I spent the rest of that day reading through the letters again and studying the photographs. I tried to imagine what Elena's life had been like, loving someone who belonged to someone else, raising a daughter mostly alone, always being the secret that couldn't be shared. I tried to imagine what Carmen's life had been like, having a father who visited but couldn't stay, who sent birthday cards but couldn't attend birthday parties, who loved her but couldn't claim her publicly. And I tried to imagine what my life would have been like if I had known the truth from the beginning. Would I have married Robert anyway? Would I have been able to accept that he had another family, another set of responsibilities, another woman who would always have a claim on his heart? Or would I have walked away and found someone else, someone whose love was simpler and more exclusive? I honestly didn't know. The Mary I was at 25 might have run from such a complicated situation. But the Mary I was now, at 72, understood that love is rarely simple and that good people sometimes make choices that hurt other good people without meaning to. That night I called Sarah. "Hi, Mom," she answered on the second ring. "How are you doing? Did you make any progress with Dad's things today?" "Sarah," I said, and then stopped. "How do you tell your daughter that everything she thought she knew about her family is wrong? How do you explain that her father had a secret daughter and a secret life without destroying her memories of him?" "Mom, are you okay? You sound strange." "I found something today," I said finally. "Something that changes things. Can you come home? Can you take a few days off work and come home? I need to talk to you and Michael together, and it's not something I can explain over the phone." "You're scaring me," Sarah said. "What kind of something? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just complicated. Your father had secrets, Sarah. Important secrets that I think you and Michael need to know about." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Secrets like what?" "Like the fact that you have a half-sister named Carmen who lives in California and is 3 years older than you." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that I wondered if the call had been dropped. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'll explain everything when you get here," I said. "Just please come home. Please trust me that this is important." Sarah agreed to fly in the next weekend, and Michael agreed to come over for dinner on Saturday evening. I spent the week trying to figure out how to tell them what I'd discovered, how to explain their father's double life without destroying their relationship with his memory. I also spent the week thinking about Elena and Carmen. I found myself wondering what they were doing, whether they knew Robert was gone, whether they were waiting for visits that would never come. The not knowing was eating at me. Finally, on Friday afternoon I made a decision. I called the number Robert had left for Elena. It rang 4 times before a woman answered. "Hello. Is this Elena Rodriguez?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Yes, this is Elena. Who is this?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Mary Patterson. I was married to Robert Patterson." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could hear Elena breathing, but she didn't speak for what felt like forever. Finally, she said, "Oh my God. Mary. He told me about you. About your children. I always wondered." "Elena," I said gently, "I'm calling because I have something to tell you. Robert died 6 months ago. He had a heart attack." I heard Elena gasp, and then she started to cry. Not just crying, sobbing. Deep, grief-stricken sobs that told me everything I needed to know about how much she had loved my husband. "I'm so sorry," she managed to say through her tears. "I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry that you found out about us this way. Robert always said he would tell you someday, but someday never came, I finished for her. No, Elena whispered. It never came. We talked for over an hour. Elena told me about meeting Robert, about falling in love with him, about the difficult decision to break up with him after Carmen was born. She told me about the years of hoping he would choose her, and then the years of accepting that he wouldn't, and finally the years of just being grateful for whatever relationship they could have. I never wanted to be the other woman, she said. That's not who I am, and that's not the life I wanted. But I loved him so much, and Carmen needed her father. I convinced myself that what we had was better than nothing. And Carmen? I asked. How is she? She's wonderful, Elena said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. She's a social worker now, married to a good man, has 2 little boys. She always understood that her father had another family that came first, but she loved him anyway. She's been asking me lately why he hasn't visited, why he hasn't called. She was starting to worry that something had happened to him. She was right to worry, I said. Elena started crying again. I can't believe he's gone, she whispered. I can't believe I'll never see him again. I found myself comforting the other woman in my husband's life, telling her that Robert had loved her, that she had made his life richer, that she had nothing to feel guilty about. And strangely, I meant every word of it. Elena, I said finally, I want you to know that I'm not angry with you. I'm not angry with Robert either, not really. I'm confused and hurt, and I wish things had been different. But I understand that sometimes people get caught in impossible situations and do the best they can. You're very generous, Elena said. I don't know if I could be as understanding if I were in your position. Maybe you could, I said. Maybe when you love someone, you find ways to forgive them even when they make mistakes. We talked about practical things then. Elena wanted to know about the funeral, about Robert's final years, about whether he had been happy. I told her about his retirement, about his hobbies, about the grandchildren he had doted on. She told me about his visits to Sacramento, about how he had been present for all of Carmen's major life events, about how he had been a devoted grandfather to her boys. There's something else, I said finally. Robert left me a letter explaining everything, and he said that if I wanted to, I could contact you and Carmen. He said you might welcome the opportunity to meet me and my children. Elena was quiet for a moment. Would you want that? She asked. Would you want to meet Carmen? Would your children want to know they have a sister? I don't know, I admitted. I haven't told them yet. I'm going to tell them this weekend. But I think I would like to meet Carmen. And I think Robert would have wanted his children to know each other. Carmen would be thrilled, Elena said. She's always been curious about you and Sarah and Michael. She used to ask Robert questions about his other family, and he would tell her little stories sometimes. She knows that Sarah is a teacher and that Michael runs his own business. She knows that you make the world's best chocolate chip cookies, and that you taught Robert how to garden. The fact that Robert had shared details about our life with Elena and Carmen surprised me. But it also made me feel better somehow. It suggested that he hadn't been compartmentalizing us completely, that his 2 families had been connected in his heart even if they weren't connected in reality. We made plans for Elena and Carmen to fly to Denver the following month. I would have a chance to tell my children about their half-sister first, to let them process the information and decide how they wanted to handle the situation. Then, if everyone was comfortable with it, we would all meet. Mary, Elena said before we hung up, thank you for calling me. Thank you for letting me know what happened to Robert. And thank you for not hating me. Thank you for loving him, I said. Thank you for giving him Carmen. Thank you for being part of his life even when it was complicated. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried for the first time since Robert's funeral. But these weren't tears of grief or anger. They were tears of relief. For 6 months, I had been mourning the loss of a man I thought I knew completely. Now I was mourning the loss of a man who was more complex and more human than I had ever imagined, but also more loving. Robert hadn't been living a double life because he was selfish or deceptive. He had been living a double life because he had loved too many people and hadn't known how to choose between them. Saturday evening came and Sarah and Michael arrived for dinner. I had made Robert's favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, green beans, and apple pie for dessert. We ate and made small talk. and I could see both of my children watching me carefully, trying to figure out what I was going to tell them. After dinner, I brought out the wooden box and set it on the dining room table. "What I'm about to tell you is going to change how you think about your father," I began. "It's going to raise questions about our family that I can't fully answer. But I want you to know before I start that everything you remember about Dad is real. He loved you both completely. He was proud of you both completely. He was exactly the father you remember him being." Then I told them everything. I showed them the photographs, read them excerpts from Elena's letters, explained about Carmen and the decades-long relationship Robert had maintained with his first family. I watched their faces go through the same range of emotions I had experienced: shock, confusion, hurt, and finally a kind of sad understanding. "So we have a sister," Sarah said when I finished. "We have a sister we've never met." "You have a sister who grew up wishing she could know you," I said. "Elena told me that Carmen has always been curious about you both." Michael was quiet for a long time, studying one of the photographs of Robert with Carmen. "He looks happy in these pictures," he said finally. "Different but happy." "He was happy," I said. "He was happy with all of us, I think. He just couldn't figure out how to put all the pieces of his life together in one place." "Are you going to meet them?" Sarah asked. "This Elena woman and our sister?" "I'd like to," I said. "But only if you two are comfortable with it. This affects all of us, and I don't want to do anything that would hurt you, or make you feel like I'm betraying Dad's memory." Sarah and Michael looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that siblings have. "I think we should meet her," Sarah said finally. "Carmen. She's our sister, whether we knew about her or not. And she lost Dad too." Michael nodded. "I agree. It's not her fault that Dad made complicated choices. And maybe she can tell us things about him that we didn't know." So we made plans. Elena and Carmen would come to Denver in 3 weeks. We would have dinner together, meet Carmen's husband and children, and try to figure out how to be a family that had been split in half for 40 years. The 3 weeks passed quickly. I found myself nervous and excited in equal measure. What do you say to the daughter your husband kept secret? How do you integrate someone into your family when they've been a part of it all along, just in a different way? Elena and Carmen arrived on a Friday afternoon. I picked them up at the airport, my heart pounding as I waited at the baggage claim with a sign that said, "Rodriguez family." I spotted them immediately. Elena looked exactly like her Facebook photos, and Carmen looked so much like Sarah that it was startling. The first few minutes were awkward. We stood there looking at each other, 3 women connected by a man who wasn't there to make introductions. Finally, Carmen stepped forward. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, and then stopped. "I don't know what to call you." "Call me Mary," I said. "And I'm sorry for your loss. I know you loved him too." Carmen started to cry then, and I found myself hugging my husband's secret daughter, this woman who was a stranger but also family, who had been grieving the same man I was grieving but hadn't been able to talk to anyone who really understood. "I've been so angry at him," she whispered. "For dying without telling me he was sick, for leaving without saying goodbye, for keeping us separate all these years when we could have been family." "I've been angry too," I admitted. "But I think maybe anger is just part of grief. Maybe we can be angry together, and then figure out how to move forward." That evening, Sarah and Michael came for dinner, and we all sat around my dining room table, Robert's dining room table, and tried to figure out how to be related to each other. It was strange at first, but as the evening wore on, I watched my children discover their sister, and I watched Carmen discover the family she'd always wondered about. Carmen brought photo albums showing Robert's visits over the years, and we brought our own albums showing the life he'd lived with us. We compared stories, filled in gaps, and slowly began to piece together a more complete picture of the man we'd all loved. "He used to tell me about Mary's chocolate chip cookies," Carmen told Sarah and Michael. "He said they were so good that he had to hide them from himself or he'd eat the whole batch. He told us about a social worker he knew in California who was making a real difference in children's lives," Sarah responded. "He was always so proud when he talked about her work." "That was me," Carmen said with a smile. "He was proud of me?" "So proud," Michael confirmed. "He just couldn't tell us it was his daughter he was talking about." We talked until midnight that first night. And by the time Elena and Carmen went back to their hotel, something had shifted. We weren't strangers anymore. We were family members who were getting to know each other for the first time, but we were definitely family. The next day, Carmen's husband and children arrived, and I got to meet the grandchildren I never knew I had. 6-year-old Robert, named after the grandfather he'd met but couldn't publicly acknowledge, and 4-year-old James, who had his grandfather's stubborn chin and mischievous smile. Sarah brought her children, and Michael brought his, and suddenly my backyard was full of cousins meeting each other for the first time. The children adapted much more quickly than the adults did. To them it was simple, they had more family now, more people to love and be loved by. That afternoon, while the children played and the men grilled hamburgers, Elena and I sat on my back porch and talked. "He would have loved this," she said, watching all the grandchildren running around together. "This is what he always wanted. All of his family in one place. He should have found a way to make it happen while he was alive," I said. "We lost 40 years of being family because he was too scared to tell the truth." "Maybe," Elena said. "Or maybe it wouldn't have worked 40 years ago. Maybe we all needed to be older and more mature to handle this kind of complicated situation." I thought about that. Would I have been able to share my husband with another woman when I was 30 and insecure about my place in the world? Would Sarah and Michael have been able to accept a half-sister when they were children competing for their father's attention? Would Carmen have been able to understand that her father loved other people too when she was young, and needed to feel like the center of his world? Maybe Elena was right. Maybe this family reunion was only possible now, when we were all old enough and secure enough to understand that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. On Sunday, before Elena and Carmen flew back to California, we all went to visit Robert's grave. I had been there many times since the funeral, usually alone, sometimes with Sarah or Michael. But this time felt different. This time we were all there together, his widow, his first love, all 3 of his children, all of his grandchildren. Carmen brought flowers. Yellow roses, which she said had always been Robert's favorite. I hadn't known that. After 47 years of marriage, I was still learning new things about my husband. We stood around his headstone in a circle, and I realized that this was probably the first and last time Robert's entire family would be together in one place. It seemed fitting that it would happen at his grave, where he couldn't run away or keep secrets or maintain separate lives. "Hi, Dad," Carmen said, kneeling down to place the roses on his grave. "I brought everyone together, just like you always wanted. We're all here." Sarah knelt down next to her half-sister and added our flowers, white carnations, which had been Robert's second favorite. "We know about each other now," she said. "We know about Elena and Carmen, and they know about us. I think you would be happy about that." Michael added his flowers and said, "We're not angry anymore, Dad. We understand why you made the choices you made. We just wish you trusted us enough to tell us the truth." Elena knelt down last and placed a single red rose on the grave. "Rest in peace, my love," she whispered. "Your secret is safe, and your family is together." I didn't kneel down, but I placed my hand on the headstone and said what I'd been thinking for weeks. "Robert, you complicated, impossible, loving man. Forgive you. We all forgive you. And we're going to take care of each other from now on, the way you always wanted us to." The children didn't really understand the significance of the moment, but they seemed to sense that it was important. They stood quietly while the adults had their moment with Robert, and then they started asking if they could go get ice cream. As we walked back to our cars, Carmen fell into step beside me. "Mary," she said, "I want you to know that I never wished my father would leave you to be with us. I never wanted to break up your family, or take him away from you." "I know," I said. "And I want you to know that I never would have wanted him to abandon you and your mother. You deserve to have a father, even if the situation was complicated." "So what happens now?" Carmen asked. "Do we stay in touch? Do we try to be some kind of family?" I thought about it for a moment. "I think we already are some kind of family," I said. "Maybe not a traditional family, but a real one. I think we keep getting to know each other. I think we visit back and forth. I think we make sure our children grow up knowing their cousins." "And holidays?" Carmen asked. "I know it's weird, but I always wondered what your family's holidays were like." "You're welcome at any holiday you want to join," I said. "All of you. Elena too. We'll figure out how to make room at the table." Carmen smiled. Dad would have loved that. Yes, I said. He really would have. Over the next few months we settled into a routine. Carmen and I talked on the phone every week. Sarah and Carmen started a text thread where they shared pictures of their children and compared parenting stories. Michael helped Carmen's husband with some business advice when he was thinking about expanding his contracting company. Elena and I developed an unlikely friendship. We found that we had more in common than just Robert. We both loved reading, we both worried about our children more than we should, and we both struggled with arthritis that made gardening more difficult than it used to be. Sometimes she would call just to talk about her day, or to ask for advice about her grandchildren, or to share a memory of Robert that she thought I might appreciate. You know, she told me during one of our conversations, I always thought I would hate you if I ever met you. I thought you were the woman who stole my life, who got the man I was supposed to marry. And now? I asked. Now I think Robert was right to choose you for his wife, she said. You're the kind of woman who builds a stable life, who raises children well, who creates a real home. I don't know if I could have given him that. I was too emotional, too dramatic, too needy. You gave him Carmen, I reminded her. You gave him a first love that was passionate and exciting. You gave him a reason to keep believing in romance even when our marriage got routine and predictable. Do you really believe that? Elena asked. I do, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. I think Robert needed both of us in different ways. I think he needed me for stability and partnership and building a future. And he needed you for passion and adventure and remembering who he used to be before he became responsible for everything. 6 months after that first phone call to Elena, we decided to plan a family reunion. All of us, Elena and Carmen and her family, me and Sarah and Michael and our families. We rented a cabin in the mountains for a long weekend, and for the first time in Robert's life, his entire family was together in one place while he wasn't around to manage the situation. It was wonderful and complicated and sometimes awkward, but it was also healing. The children treated it like any other family gathering. They played games and told stories and argued over who got the last piece of pie. The adults worked harder at it, but we managed to create something that felt like belonging. On the last night of the reunion, after the children had gone to bed, the 5 adults sat around the fire and talked about Robert. I used to resent him for not choosing, Carmen said. I thought if he really loved me, he would have found a way to make it work with my mom. If he really loved my mom, he wouldn't have married someone else. I used to think the same thing, Sarah admitted. Not about Elena and Carmen. I didn't know about them, but about other things. I thought if Dad really loved us, he wouldn't travel so much for work. I thought if he really cared about our family, he would be more present. But now I think maybe he was doing the best he could, Michael added. Maybe he was trying to take care of everyone he loved, even when those responsibilities pulled him in different directions. Elena nodded. Robert wasn't perfect. He made choices that hurt people, and he kept secrets that probably didn't need to be secrets. But he wasn't malicious. He was just a man who loved more people than he knew how to love properly. And maybe that's not the worst thing, I said. Maybe it's better to love too much than too little. Maybe it's better to try to take care of everyone, even if you fail sometimes, than to only care about yourself. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down. Finally, Elena spoke again. Do you think he would be happy with how this turned out? She asked. Do you think he would be proud that we found each other and figured out how to be family? I think he would be amazed, I said. I think he would be grateful and relieved and maybe a little bit ashamed that it took him dying for us to all come together. But mostly proud, Carmen added. I think he would be proud that we chose love over anger, that we chose family over resentment. Yes, I agreed. Mostly proud. That night, I lay in my bed in the cabin and thought about the journey I'd been on since finding that wooden box in Robert's closet. I had discovered that my marriage was more complicated than I'd realized, but also more loving. I had learned that my husband was not the simple, straightforward man everyone thought he was, but he wasn't a deceiver either. He was someone who had tried to honor his commitments to everyone he cared about, even when those commitments were contradictory. Most importantly, I had gained a daughter and a daughter-in-law and 2 more grandchildren and a friend in Elena. I had expanded my definition of family to include people who had been connected to me for decades without my knowing it. The next morning, as we packed up to leave the cabin, Carmen pulled me aside. "Mary," she said, "I want you to have something." She handed me a small wooden frame containing a photograph I hadn't seen before. It showed Robert at what looked like a park, pushing a young Carmen on a swing while Elena sat on a nearby bench, laughing at something he was saying. All three of them looked completely happy, completely natural together. "This is from when I was about 5, Carmen explained. "It was taken during one of Dad's visits. I want you to have it because I think it shows how much joy he got from being able to love all of us, even when it was complicated." I looked at the photograph and saw what Carmen meant. Robert looked relaxed and happy in a way that was different from our family pictures, but not better or worse. Just different. He looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. "Thank you," I told Carmen. "I'll treasure this. And I want you to know," Carmen continued, "that I don't think of you as my father's other wife anymore. I think of you as my stepmother. Is that okay?" I started to cry then. Right there in the cabin's living room with everyone packing around us. "That's more than okay," I said. "That's perfect." Today, almost 2 years after I found that wooden box, my life looks completely different than it did when I was just Mary Patterson, widow of Robert Patterson, mother of Sarah and Michael. Now I'm Mary Patterson, stepmother to Carmen Rodriguez Martinez, friend to Elena Rodriguez, grandmother to 8 grandchildren instead of 4. Elena visits me twice a year, and I've been to Sacramento 3 times. Carmen and I talk every week, and her children call me Grandma Mary, which makes me ridiculously happy. Sarah and Carmen have become genuine friends, bonding over their careers and helping professions, and their shared frustration with their father's secretiveness. Michael has helped Carmen's husband with his business, and now they're talking about going into partnership together. The wooden box sits on my dresser now, not hidden in a closet but displayed where I can see it every day. It reminds me that the people we love are often more complex than we realize, and that discovering new depths to someone doesn't diminish what we already knew about them. I still miss Robert every day. I still wish he had found the courage to tell me about Elena and Carmen while he was alive. I still wonder what our lives would have been like if we had been one big, complicated, blended family from the beginning instead of 2 separate families connected by one man's divided heart. But I'm not angry anymore. How can I be angry with someone who gave me not only 47 years of marriage and 2 wonderful children, but also a stepdaughter I adore, a friend I never expected to have, and grandchildren who have filled my life with even more joy? Robert was right about one thing in his final letter to me. Love doesn't diminish when it's shared. Finding out that he loved Elena and Carmen didn't make his love for me any less real or meaningful. It just made him more human, more complicated, and ultimately more worthy of love himself. Sometimes I imagine what I would say to Robert if I could talk to him now. I think I would tell him that his secret is safe, that his family is together, that his children all know about each other and love each other. I think I would tell him that Elena is doing well, that Carmen is proud to be his daughter, that his grandchildren are growing up knowing they belong to a big, complex, loving family. Most of all, I think I would tell him that I understand now why he made the choices he made, and that I forgive him for the pain those choices caused. I would tell him that I'm proud to have been his wife, and I'm proud to be part of the family legacy he created, even if he created it in the most complicated way possible. The box that changed everything sits on my dresser, and every morning when I see it, I'm reminded that life is full of surprises, that love is more complicated than we expect it to be, and that families can be created in ways we never imagined. Robert's secret didn't destroy our family. It just made our family bigger, more complex, and ultimately more beautiful than any of us knew it could be.